Do you believe in reincarnation? What if we told you that right now there are documented cases, real cases, investigated by university researchers that might just prove the impossible? And if you think that the idea of past lives only exists in ancient religions or Hollywood movies, that there always has to be a logical explanation for everything, then we are genuinely curious to hear how you are going to explain these cases. Because what you are about to hear is not fiction. These are real children, real families, real investigations conducted by professors at one of America's most respected medical schools. Children who described deaths they never witnessed, named people they never met, and knew details that no child could possibly know. So let us start with the case that made even the biggest skeptics pause. And this one is going to stay with you long after you finish watching. Let us jump straight into it. Number 10. The 4-year-old who remembered dying in World War II. In the spring of the year 2000, in a quiet Louisiana home, something was happening that would eventually make headlines around the world. A 2-year-old boy named James Leininger began having nightmares. But these were not ordinary nightmares about monsters under the bed or scary shadows. These nightmares were violent, terrifying, and far too specific. Night after night, little James would wake up screaming, thrashing in his bed, kicking his legs as if trying to escape from something. His mother, Andrea, would rush into his room to find him on his back, legs pumping against the air, arms clawing at an invisible ceiling above him. And then came the words that changed everything. Airplane crash. Plane on fire. Little man cannot get out. Andrea and her husband Bruce, who worked as a human resources executive, tried to comfort their son. They assumed it was just a phase. Children have nightmares all the time, after all. But James kept repeating the same details, the same phrases, and soon he started saying things during the day too, things that a 2-year-old boy in Louisiana should know absolutely nothing about. He talked about flying airplanes, not just any airplanes, but specific World War II fighter planes. He would point at pictures and identify aircraft with startling accuracy. A Corsair, a Wildcat, a Zero. He knew the difference between drop tanks and bombs. He understood what a cockpit was and how instruments worked. Now here is where it gets really interesting. When Andrea asked her son who the little man was in the burning plane, James looked at her and said one word: me. He said James was the little man, and that the Japanese shot him down. For a while, Bruce and Andrea tried to ignore what was happening. Bruce especially struggled with this. He was a devout Christian, and the idea of reincarnation went directly against everything he believed. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe James had seen a war movie. Maybe he had heard something on television. But then James started providing details that could not be explained away so easily. He said his plane had taken off from a boat. When asked what kind of boat, he said a ship. When asked the name of the ship, this little boy who could barely tie his own shoes said one word: Natoma. Bruce assumed this was gibberish, baby talk, the made-up nonsense of a toddler's imagination. But just to be certain, he decided to look it up. And what he found made his blood run cold. The USS Natoma Bay was a real aircraft carrier. It served in the Pacific Theater during World War II, and it participated in the battle for Iwo Jima. Bruce was stunned. How could his son know the name of an actual World War II aircraft carrier? A ship that historians barely remember. A vessel whose name does not appear in movies or television shows. But James was not done revealing secrets. He told his parents that he had a friend on the ship, a pilot, and when they asked what his friend's name was, James said it clearly: Jack Larson. Now Bruce was genuinely disturbed. He began researching obsessively, contacting naval historians, searching military records, and trying to find any connection between his family and the Natoma Bay. There was none. The Leininger family had no military background, no connection to the Navy, no relatives who had served in the Pacific during World War II. And yet, Bruce eventually discovered that a pilot named Jack Larson had indeed served aboard the USS Natoma Bay. The records confirmed it. A man named Jack Larson had been stationed on that exact ship. This was no longer a story that could be dismissed as childhood fantasy. As months passed, James continued revealing more details. He drew pictures of aerial combat, signing them with a peculiar signature: James 3. When his parents asked why he signed his name that way, James explained that he was the third James. There had been 2 Jameses before him. Think about that for a moment. A child, barely out of diapers, claiming that he was the third incarnation of someone named James. Not just making up a story, but providing verifiable details that historians were able to confirm. Bruce eventually discovered the identity of the pilot James claimed to be. His name was James McCready Houston Jr., a 21-year-old Navy pilot from Pennsylvania who was shot down during the battle for Iwo Jima on March 3, 1945. The manner of his death matched exactly what little James had been describing in his nightmares. Houston's plane was hit in the engine by Japanese anti-aircraft fire. The engine exploded in a ball of flames. The plane crashed into the ocean near a volcanic island. And here is the detail that sent chills down the spines of everyone who heard it. Eyewitnesses who had watched the crash remembered that the plane went down so fast, so violently, that there was no way the pilot could have escaped. He was trapped inside a burning cockpit, unable to get out. Little man cannot get out. The investigation deepened. Bruce tracked down Anne Barron, the surviving sister of James Houston Jr. She was in her 80s and living in California. When Bruce told her about his son and the memories he was sharing, Anne was skeptical. But then she agreed to meet the family. What happened during that meeting left Anne in tears. James looked at old family photographs and identified people he should never have recognized. He pointed to a picture of James Houston standing in front of a Corsair aircraft and said that was him. He mentioned specific details about Houston's childhood, his hobbies, and his personality that Anne confirmed were accurate. And then James did something that removed any remaining doubt Anne may have had. He called her Annie. That was the private nickname James Houston had used for his sister, a name that appeared in no official records, a name that only someone who had known her personally, someone who had loved her, would have used. Anne Barron embraced the little boy. She told him she was glad he had come back. The case of James Leininger has been investigated by Dr. Jim Tucker, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia Medical School. Tucker has studied over 2,500 cases of children who claim to remember past lives. And in his professional opinion, the Leininger case is one of the strongest he has ever examined. The details were documented before the previous personality was identified. Multiple witnesses confirmed the boy's statements independently, and the emotional connection between James and the Houston family was unmistakable. James Leininger's nightmares eventually faded as he grew older. Today, he says that the memories have become less vivid, though he can still access them if he tries. His parents wrote a book about their experience called Soul Survivor, and the case has been featured on major news networks around the world. But this was only the beginning, because what you are about to hear next involves a child who did something even more extraordinary. He did not just remember a past life, he corrected official government records. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It is completely free and helps us continue creating these fascinating investigations into the unknown. Thank you so much. Number 9. The Oklahoma boy who lived as a Hollywood star. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of your 4-year-old son screaming. You rush to his room and find him clutching his chest, crying out that his heart is exploding, that he is dying, that everything is going dark. This is what happened to Cindy Hammonds in the small town of Muskogee, Oklahoma. Her son, Ryan, had begun experiencing terrifying nightmares around the age of 4. But unlike typical childhood fears, Ryan's nightmares were specific, detailed, and completely impossible for a little boy in rural Oklahoma to know. Ryan would wake up screaming that his heart was exploding. He described dying alone, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, and during the day, he would beg his mother to take him home to Hollywood. Now, Muskogee, Oklahoma, is about 1,400 miles from Los Angeles. Ryan had never been to California. His family had no connections to the entertainment industry. His parents were Baptist Christians who worked regular jobs. His father was a police lieutenant. His mother was a county clerk deputy. They had never discussed Hollywood with their son. But Ryan insisted. He cried for his other family. He talked about meeting movie stars. He described dancing on Broadway. He mentioned traveling to Paris. He spoke about working at an agency where people changed their names. At first, Cindy thought her son was simply imaginative. Children make up stories all the time. But the level of detail Ryan provided was unsettling. He described specific street addresses in Beverly Hills. He talked about owning a swimming pool. He mentioned having multiple wives over the course of his life. What 4-year-old talks about having 5 marriages? Cindy decided to do some research. She went to the local library and checked out books about old Hollywood. She thought that maybe, just maybe, if she showed Ryan some pictures, he would see that his memories were just fantasies. Instead, Ryan pointed at a photograph in a book about 1930s cinema and said something that made his mother's heart stop. "That is me. That is who I used to be." The photograph was from the 1932 film Night After Night, starring George Raft and featuring the film debut of Mae West. But Ryan was not pointing at the famous actors. He was pointing at an extra, a man standing in the background with no speaking lines, a man so obscure that his name did not even appear in the credits. Cindy was confused. How could her son remember being someone so anonymous, someone whose name was not in any database, someone who Google did not even know? She contacted Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. Tucker, who had taken over the Reincarnation Research program from the legendary Dr. Ian Stevenson, agreed to investigate. He flew to Oklahoma to interview Ryan personally. What Tucker found was remarkable. Ryan provided over 50 specific details about his past life. He knew addresses. He knew names of people. He knew intimate details about the entertainment industry in the 1940s and 1950s. He even knew information that had not been published anywhere online. The problem was identifying who Ryan claimed to be. That extra in the photograph had no credits, no biographical information, no Wikipedia page. Eventually, Tucker hired a professional film archivist. After weeks of research, the archivist was able to determine the name of the mysterious extra, Marty Martin. Born Morris Kalinsky in Philadelphia in 1903, Marty Martin had started his career as a tap dancer on Broadway before moving to Hollywood. When acting did not work out, he became a talent agent, running the successful Marty Martin Agency. He had traveled the world, married multiple times, and lived in a large house on North Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills. Every single detail matched what Ryan had been saying for years. But here is where the case takes an incredible turn. Ryan had told his mother that he did not understand why God would let someone live to be 61 years old and then make him come back as a baby. Tucker looked at Martin's death certificate, which stated that the man had died at the age of 59. Ryan was wrong, or so it seemed. But Tucker investigated further. He found Marty Martin's original birth certificate, which showed that he was actually born in 1903, not 1905, as the death certificate indicated. The official records were wrong. Ryan was right. Marty Martin had actually been 61 years old when he died. A 4-year-old boy from Oklahoma had just corrected a government document. Tucker eventually verified 55 separate details that Ryan had provided about his life as Marty Martin. Ryan knew about the swimming pool at his old house. He knew about the street that had the word rock in its name, which turned out to be North Roxbury Drive. He knew about dancing on Broadway and working at an agency. He even knew that he had been punched by Marilyn Monroe's bodyguards. Tucker arranged for Ryan to meet Marty Martin's daughter. The woman was shocked by what Ryan knew about her father. Details that even she had not remembered. Information that had never been published anywhere. As Ryan grew older, his memories of being Marty Martin began to fade. This is consistent with what researchers have observed in other cases. Children who remember past lives typically lose those memories around the age of 7 or 8. The past life gets absorbed into their current identity, like a dream that gradually slips away upon waking. But for several years, Ryan Hammonds was absolutely certain that he had lived before, and the evidence strongly suggests that he may have been right. Are you ready for something even more disturbing? Because the next case involves a child who did not just remember a past life. He solved his own murder. Number 8. The 3-year-old who found his own body. In the Golan Heights region, near the border between Syria and Israel, lives a community called the Druze. For the Druze people, reincarnation is not a mysterious concept or a matter of faith. It is simply how the universe works. Every soul returns. Every death is followed by a new birth. Because of this belief, Druze elders pay special attention to children who claim memories of past lives. They listen, they investigate, and sometimes they discover things that change everything. This particular case was documented by Dr. Eli Lash, a prominent Israeli physician who served as a senior consultant in the coordination of health services in the Gaza Strip. What he witnessed in the late 1960s still defies explanation. A young boy, whose name was never publicly disclosed for privacy reasons, was born with a distinctive red birthmark on his head. For the Druze, birthmarks like these are significant. They believe such marks indicate the location of fatal wounds from a previous life. As soon as the boy learned to speak, he began telling his parents a disturbing story. He claimed that in his previous life he had been murdered, struck in the head with an axe by a neighbor. At first, his parents were unsettled, but not entirely surprised. Drew's children sometimes speak of past lives, but this boy's account was unusually specific. He remembered his name from the previous life. He remembered the village where he had lived, and he remembered the full name of the man who had killed him. When the boy turned 3 years old, his parents decided to take action. They contacted village elders and invited Dr. Lash to participate in an investigation. Together, they would walk the boy through nearby villages to see if his memories could be verified. The first village they visited was not the right one. The boy looked around and shook his head. This was not where he had lived. The second village was also wrong. But when they reached the third village, the boy's behavior changed completely. He became animated, excited. He pointed at buildings and named people who lived there. He recognized locations that should have been completely foreign to him. When the group arrived at a particular house, the boy walked up to a man he had never met before in this life. He looked directly into the man's eyes and spoke. "Are you not the one who killed me?" According to Dr. Lash, the accused man's face turned completely white. He stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck, but he denied everything. He insisted he had never seen this child before and knew nothing about any murder. The boy was not deterred. He told the elders that he knew where his body was buried. He could show them. The group followed the 3-year-old through the village until he stopped at a specific location, a pile of stones. The boy pointed and said that his body was underneath. The elders began digging. What they found confirmed the impossible. Beneath those stones lay human remains, a skeleton with clear evidence of trauma to the skull. The wound matched exactly where the boy's birthmark was located. But the boy was not finished. He led the group to another location nearby and told them that this was where the murder weapon was buried. The elders dug again. They found an axe. Confronted with this evidence, the accused man finally broke down. According to Dr. Lash, the man confessed to the murder. He admitted that years earlier he had gotten into a dispute with his neighbor. The argument escalated. He grabbed an axe, and he killed the man in a fit of rage. Then he buried the body in secret and told everyone that his neighbor had simply moved away. For years, the murder had remained undiscovered. The victim's family had no idea what had happened. The community had moved on until a 3-year-old boy was born with a red birthmark on his head and memories of the man who had killed him. Dr. Lash asked what would happen to the murderer. He was told that the Druze community would not involve the police. They would handle the punishment internally. What that punishment was has never been disclosed. This case was later documented by German therapist Trutz Hardow in his book Children Who Have Lived Before. While the case lacks some of the rigorous documentation found in other reincarnation cases, the involvement of Dr. Lash and multiple witnesses gives it significant credibility. A child who remembered being murdered, a birthmark that matched the fatal wound, a body that was exactly where the boy said it would be, and a confession from the killer. How do you explain something like that? Number 7. The boy who lived before. In the year 2000, a baby boy named Cameron Macaulay was born in Glasgow, Scotland. There was nothing unusual about his birth, nothing strange about his family. He was a perfectly normal baby in a perfectly normal household. But around the age of 2, Cameron started saying something strange. "I lived in Barra. Barra is a tiny island in the Outer Hebrides, about 220 miles from Glasgow. It has a population of roughly 1,000 people. Cameron's family had never visited the island. They had no relatives there. They had no connection to it whatsoever. Yet Cameron insisted. He talked about Barra constantly. He described a white house that overlooked the beach. He talked about planes that landed on the sand. He mentioned a black and white dog that played in the yard. He spoke about watching the airplanes from his bedroom window. His mother, Norma, thought it was just imagination. Children make up stories. They have invisible friends and fantastical adventures. But Cameron's stories were different. They were consistent, specific, and he became increasingly distressed that no one believed him. He begged Norma to take him back to Barra. He cried about missing his other family. He asked where his Barra mother was and why they could not visit her. Cameron also provided specific names. He said his father's name was Shane Robertson. He said he had brothers and sisters on the island. He said the family car had been black. Now, Cameron was not just a child with an active imagination. He was a child experiencing genuine emotional distress. He missed people who, as far as his current family knew, did not exist. He mourned for a life that should never have been his to remember. Norma contacted Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. Tucker agreed to investigate the case and eventually flew to Scotland to meet Cameron in person. What he observed convinced him that this was worth taking seriously. Cameron was then 5 years old. He could describe the layout of his previous home in remarkable detail. He knew which rooms faced which direction. He knew where the bathrooms were located. He drew pictures of the White House over and over again. Tucker arranged for a television documentary crew to accompany him and the Macaulay family on a trip to Barra. They wanted to see if Cameron's memories could be verified in any way. When their plane landed on the beach at Barra, because that is actually how you get to the island, Cameron turned to his mother and smiled. "I told you the planes land on the beach." The group spent several days on the island trying to locate the house Cameron had described. They consulted a local historian who knew the island's history. Eventually, they found it. A white house, overlooking the beach, with a view of where planes land on the sand. The house had been owned by a family named Robertson in the 1960s and 1970s. They were a family from the mainland who used it as a vacation home. Cameron walked through the property and immediately found his way around. He knew the location of all 3 bathrooms. He commented on features that had changed since he remembered them. The documentary crew contacted a surviving member of the Robertson family, a woman named Gillian. She confirmed many of Cameron's memories. The black and white dog was real. The family had owned one during their time on Barra. The layout of the house was exactly as Cameron had described. But there was one detail that could not be verified. Cameron remembered his father dying after being hit by a car. Yet Gillian Robertson knew of no man in the family who had died that way. No Shane Robertson appeared in the records. Dr. Tucker notes that in Gaelic, Sean means old. It is possible that Cameron was remembering a nickname rather than an actual given name. Someone in the family may have been called Shane or Sean without it being their legal name. The case remains partially unsolved. But Cameron's detailed knowledge of a house on an island he had never visited, his accurate description of features that could only be known by someone who had lived there, and his emotional connection to the place all suggest that something extraordinary was happening. After visiting Barra, Cameron's distress gradually faded. He seemed calmer, more at peace. Having his memories validated, having actually stood in the house he had been describing for years, appeared to give him closure. His mother Norma later said that whatever the explanation might be, she was just glad her son could finally move on. Number 6. The girl who remembered her husband and children. Before any of these modern cases, before researchers at American universities began documenting children's past life memories, there was Shanti Devi, and her case was so extraordinary that it captured the attention of one of the most famous people on earth, Mahatma Gandhi. Shanti Devi was born in Delhi, India, in December 1926. For the first few years of her life, she barely spoke at all. Her parents assumed she was simply a quiet child. But when she finally began talking around the age of 4, she said something that shocked her family. She told them that her real home was not in Delhi. Her real home was in Mathura, a city about 90 miles away. She said she had a husband there named Kedarnath. She said she had given birth to a son, and she said she had died shortly after childbirth. Shanti's parents were bewildered. They had never been to Mathura. They did not know anyone named Kedarnath. They could not understand how their young daughter could be describing a life that did not belong to her. But Shanti was persistent. Over the next several years, she provided increasingly specific details about her previous life. She described the house where she had lived. She talked about her husband's profession as a cloth merchant. She used words from the Mathura dialect that should have been completely unfamiliar to a child raised in Delhi. When Shanti was about 9 years old, a teacher at her school heard her talking about Mathura and decided to investigate. He wrote a letter to the address Shanti had given, addressed to a man named Kedarnath Chaubey. He did not expect a response, but he received one. Kedarnath Chaubey was a real person. He was a cloth merchant living in Mathura, and his wife, a woman named Lugdi Devi, had died in childbirth in October 1925, 14 months before Shanti was born. The teacher was stunned. The details matched. Shanti had been describing the life of a woman who had actually existed, a woman who had died before Shanti was even conceived. Kedarnath traveled to Delhi to meet this strange child who claimed to be his dead wife. At first, he pretended to be his own brother to test Shanti's memory. But the moment she saw him, Shanti recognized him. She ran to him. She knew intimate details about their life together. She mentioned things that only Lugdi Devi could have known. Kedarnath was overwhelmed. He became convinced that this child was somehow connected to his deceased wife. The case attracted enormous public attention in India. News spread through newspapers and word of mouth until it reached Mahatma Gandhi himself. Gandhi was intrigued. He organized an official commission to investigate Shanti Devi's claims. In November 1935, the commission accompanied 9-year-old Shanti on a trip to Mathura. It was the first time she had ever visited the city in this lifetime. Yet when they arrived, Shanti demonstrated knowledge that seemed impossible. She recognized streets she had never walked. She identified family members she should never have known. She led the commission to the house where Lugdi Devi had lived. She pointed out changes that had been made since her death. She even led them to a secret location in the house where she claimed Lugdi had hidden some money. When they checked the spot, the money was gone. But Kedarnath confirmed that Lugdi had indeed hidden money there, and that he had discovered it and removed it after her death. Dr. Ian Stevenson, the pioneer of reincarnation research at the University of Virginia, later interviewed Shanti Devi and documented her case. He determined that she had made at least 24 statements about her previous life that could be verified as accurate. Shanti Devi lived the rest of her life in India, never marrying because she considered herself a widow. She passed away in 1987 at the age of 61. Her case remains one of the most thoroughly investigated reincarnation cases in history. It was examined by hundreds of researchers, scholars, critics, and public figures over more than 5 decades. And despite numerous attempts to debunk it, no satisfactory alternative explanation has ever been found. Number 5. The man who dedicated his life to documenting the impossible. By now, you might be wondering whether there is any scientific basis for these claims, whether anyone has taken the time to systematically study children who remember past lives, whether the patterns you have been hearing about are real or just coincidence. The answer is yes. For over 40 years, a team of researchers at the University of Virginia has been collecting and analyzing cases of children who claim to remember previous lives, and what they have found challenges everything we think we know about consciousness, memory, and identity. The research began with Dr. Ian Stevenson, a Canadian-born psychiatrist who became the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. In 1960, Stevenson published a paper reviewing cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. The paper caught the attention of Chester Carlson, the inventor of the Xerox copying process, who offered to fund further research. With Carlson's support, Stevenson began traveling the world, documenting cases in India, Sri Lanka, Lebanon, Turkey, Thailand, Burma, and even the United States and Europe. Over the next 4 decades, he compiled more than 3,000 cases of children who remembered previous lives. What Stevenson discovered was remarkable. The cases followed consistent patterns. Children typically began speaking about their past lives between the ages of 2 and 4. They often became distressed when their current families did not acknowledge their memories. They frequently asked to be taken to their previous homes, and their memories usually faded around the age of 7 or 8. In many cases, the children provided specific names, addresses, and details that could be verified through historical records. They identified family members from their previous lives. They demonstrated knowledge of events that had occurred before they were born. But perhaps the most striking finding was related to birthmarks. In approximately 35% of the cases Stevenson studied, the child had a birthmark or birth defect that corresponded to wounds on the deceased person they claimed to have been. Children who remembered being shot had birthmarks where the bullets had entered and exited. Children who remembered dying in fires had birth defects on the parts of their bodies that had been burned. Children who remembered being stabbed had marks where the knife had penetrated. Stevenson documented over 200 such cases in his monumental 2-volume work, Reincarnation and Biology. In many of these cases, he was able to obtain autopsy reports or medical records that confirmed the injuries on the deceased matched the marks on the child. One of the cases you heard about earlier, the Druze boy who remembered being murdered with an axe, fits this pattern exactly. His birthmark was on his head, precisely where the fatal blow had landed. Stevenson was careful never to claim that his research proved reincarnation. He called his cases suggestive rather than definitive. but he argued that the evidence was strong enough to warrant serious scientific consideration. After Stevenson's retirement in 2002 and his death in 2007, his work was continued by Dr. Jim Tucker, who has investigated many of the cases mentioned in this video. Tucker has developed a scale for evaluating the strength of past life memory cases, taking into account factors like the specificity of the child's statements, the existence of birthmarks or birth defects, and the behavior of the child in relation to the previous personality. Tucker has stated publicly that while he cannot prove reincarnation is real, he believes the evidence strongly suggests that some children do possess memories and emotions from lives that ended before they were born. Critics have proposed alternative explanations, including false memory syndrome, parental suggestion, and cultural contamination. But Tucker and his colleagues have addressed these objections through careful documentation, including cases where the child's statements were recorded before the previous personality was ever identified. The research continues at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, and with each new case, the database of evidence grows larger. Number 4. The patterns that science cannot explain. After analyzing thousands of cases, researchers have identified several consistent features that appear again and again in children who remember past lives. First, the average age at which children begin speaking about past lives is around 2 to 3 years old. This is significant because it is before most children have the cognitive ability to fabricate elaborate stories or absorb complex information from external sources. Second, the median interval between the death of the previous personality and the birth of the child is approximately 16 months. In cases involving violent death, this interval tends to be even shorter, sometimes just a few months. Third, about 70% of the children remember dying in unnatural ways, whether through accidents, violence, or sudden illness. This suggests that traumatic deaths may somehow imprint more strongly on whatever mechanism allows these memories to carry over. Fourth, many children exhibit behaviors that match the previous personality, such as phobias related to the manner of death, unusual skills, or preferences that do not match their current family. James Leininger's obsession with airplanes from infancy is a perfect example. Fifth, the memories typically fade around the age of 6 to 8, coinciding with significant developmental changes in the brain. Some researchers believe this may be when the current personality fully consolidates and the previous memories become inaccessible. Sixth, in many cases, the families of the child and the previous personality had no prior connection. The children describe people and places their current families know nothing about. When investigated, the details turn out to be accurate. These patterns are difficult to explain through conventional psychology. False memories typically do not produce verifiable details about strangers. Parental suggestion cannot account for children who provide information their parents have never heard. Cultural influence cannot explain how a child in Oklahoma knows about Broadway dancing in 1930s New York. Something appears to be happening that our current scientific models cannot fully account for. Number 3. What happens when memories fade? One of the most frequently asked questions about these cases is what happens to the children when they grow up. Do they continue to remember their past lives? Do the memories affect their development? Do they struggle with having two identities? The evidence suggests that, in most cases, the past life memories fade naturally as the child ages. By adolescence, many of these children no longer remember the details that seemed so vivid during early childhood. The previous personality gets absorbed into the current one, becoming a distant echo rather than a pressing presence. James Leininger, whose case opened this video, is now in his mid-20s. He has said in interviews that the memories of being James Houston feel like old dreams now. He can still access them if he concentrates, but they no longer have the emotional intensity they once did. The nightmares stopped years ago. Ryan Hammonds, who remembered being Hollywood agent Marty Martin, has similarly moved on. His mother reported that as Ryan got older, he stopped talking about Hollywood. The memories faded. He became a normal teenager with normal interests. This appears to be the typical trajectory. The previous life serves its purpose, whatever that purpose may be, and then gradually releases its hold on the child's consciousness. The two lives integrate into one continuous experience. However, some researchers have noted that traces of the previous personality can persist even when explicit memories are gone. Certain preferences, talents, or fears may carry over without the person understanding why. A child who remembered drowning might grow up with an unexplained fear of water. A child who remembered playing piano might demonstrate musical talent without formal training. Whether these lingering effects are genuinely connected to past lives or simply coincidental remains an open question. Number 2. The implications if this is real. Let us pause for a moment and consider what it would mean if even one of these cases were exactly what it appears to be. If James Leininger really did carry the memories and emotions of James Houston Jr., a pilot who died in 1945, then something about human consciousness must be capable of surviving physical death and transferring to a new body. This would challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of mind and identity. It would suggest that we are not simply our brains, not merely the product of neurons and synapses, but something more persistent, something that endures. Dr. Jim Tucker has speculated that quantum mechanics might provide a framework for understanding how this could work. At the quantum level, particles can be in multiple states simultaneously and can remain connected across vast distances. Tucker suggests that consciousness might function similarly, existing in a way that is not entirely bound by physical constraints. This is highly speculative, and many physicists have rejected the idea. But Tucker argues that our current models of consciousness are incomplete. We do not fully understand how subjective experience arises from physical processes in the brain. There may be aspects of mind that we have not yet discovered. Regardless of the mechanism, if reincarnation is real, it has profound implications for how we think about life, death, and the human experience. It suggests that our current lifetime may be just one chapter in a much longer story, that the relationships we form, the lessons we learn, and the experiences we have may somehow continue beyond our physical deaths. It is a strange and humbling thought. Number 1. The question that remains. We have traveled through Louisiana and Oklahoma, through the Golan Heights and the Isle of Barra, through Delhi and the halls of the University of Virginia. We have heard about children who knew things they should never have known, who remembered deaths they never experienced, who recognized strangers as members of families they had loved in other lives. What do we make of all this? The skeptic will point out that memory is unreliable, that children are suggestible, that coincidences happen, that we naturally look for patterns even where none exist. These are all valid points, but the skeptic must also contend with specific, verifiable details provided by children too young to fabricate them. with birthmarks that match autopsy wounds, with emotional connections that cannot be explained through normal psychology, with 3,000 cases collected over 4 decades by rigorous academic researchers. The believer will see confirmation of ancient wisdom. Every major religion, except those of the Abrahamic tradition, accepts some form of reincarnation. Perhaps modern science is simply catching up to what mystics have known for millennia. But the believer must also acknowledge that these cases do not fit neatly into any traditional religious framework. The mechanisms remain mysterious. The patterns are incomplete. Not every case can be verified. Perhaps the most honest position is somewhere in between. These cases are genuinely puzzling. They resist easy explanation. They suggest that consciousness may be stranger, more durable, and more connected than we currently understand. And perhaps that is enough. We do not need to have all the answers to appreciate the wonder of what these children have experienced. To feel the weight of James Leininger recognizing a pilot he should never have known. To imagine Ryan Hammonds staring at a photograph and pointing to a man he used to be. To picture a 3-year-old boy in the Golan Heights leading elders to his own buried body. These stories remind us that the universe still holds mysteries, that there are questions we cannot yet answer, that the boundaries between life and death, past and present, self and other, may be more porous than we assume. What do you think? Are these children truly remembering past lives? Or is there some other explanation we have not yet considered? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, here is a question for you. If you discovered that you had lived before, would you want to know who you were? Would you seek out your previous family? Or would you prefer to let the past remain buried? Let us know your answer in the comments. We read every single one. If you found this video fascinating, you might want to check out the one on screen right now. It covers another incredible mystery that scientists still cannot explain. And if you made it this far, do not forget to subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, diving deep into the mysteries that science is only beginning to understand. Thank you for watching.